you healthcare also, for example, we have a situation where a lot of people travel abroad to seek healthcare, whereas a lot of our doctors are the ones who staff those hospitals abroad. We talk a lot about how, doctors, nurses, healthcare professionals are leaving the country and incidentally are employed in many of all these hospitals that people go to abroad. That's also another area that tourism. Tourism again, cultural tourism is another aspect that we don't emphasize enough. When we look in terms of all the cultures that we have in the country, we look at our geographical spreads, the histories, all those sort of things. There are a lot of things that we can make money from as a country. For example, I would prefer a situation where, like I said earlier on, yes, we have oil, yes, we're harnessing its benefits, but we're gradually trying to move away from oil. And then we also need to remember that with the exploration of this oil also comes other environmental issues. In the times past, we've seen issues in areas around the Niger Delta, especially, which has been hit with a lot of environmental issues and concerns. Even up till now, in many areas in the lower Niger Delta basin areas, you have reports where farming, for example, cannot take place. The water is completely polluted, the air is polluted, flaring is still on. I'm sure we don't want, to make we don't want this, we don't want to make this an endless practice in the country. And these are all the by effects that will come with exploring and tapping that oil potential. So yes, we have that oil. Yes, it's fine. We can harness part of the benefits, but we also need to gradually think of moving away from just focusing on oil. Anytime, government is talking about revenue and all of that, there's always a great emphasis on how much we're making, how much we're making and we can make from oil. I know that this current government is also trying to diversify into other areas, but I believe that the focus needs to be further strengthened. In fact, there probably even needs to be a plan where we can say, for example, that we're reliant on oil maybe up onto about a certain percentage, and then other aspects of the economy that are being developed have also, contributed a significant part to the national budget. And what we also need to realize is that when we open up other sectors of the economy as well, we're also opening up employment, for example. We're also opening up economic empowerment. We're also opening up development, and not just in the areas where there are oil, but across various parts of the country. So we're talking the northwest, the northeast, the north central, or southeast, southwest. But even as I see all of these things, I still remember that we have our own internal security issues, which will also hamper on all of these things. So at the end of the day, yes, it's nice that we have this oil, but we need to remember there are climate issues. A lot of countries are trying to move away from fossil fuels. We need to remember also that there are environmental concerns that come with tapping and harnessing this oil. And we also need to remember that there are other benefits that we can gain from unlocking other aspects of the economy as well.
As you were speaking, I remember something somebody said, and I'll take your photo on it briefly. The person said, maybe, just maybe, we need to pretend as if we do not have oil because it seems to be the bane of our economic existence as a nation.
Funny enough, funny that you mentioned that. So I write a weekly article, and there's an article sitting in my drafts that is titled exactly that.
Ha!
What if Nigeria did not have oil? I think about it all the time. There's the cost of black gold, about how countries that have oil never seem to do so well in spite of all the wealth that they have and all of that. We need to be able to move away from that, and many times you realize that when there's an abundance of something, there tends to be a lot of misuse and all of that. So you don't get the full benefits of that. So sometimes maybe scarcity or lack, you know, can be quite beneficial. It helps you think deeper.
And that ties into the next one coming from Guardian. OSOPADEC, standing for Ondo State Oil Producing Areas Development Commission, on Tuesday appealed for an increase in its allocation from the state 13% oil derivation fund, arguing that the current 40% is insufficient to tackle the developmental challenges facing the impoverished oil-rich riverine areas communities in the state.
So, also PADEC is a commission established by the Ondo State government, and it was established in 2004. Ondo State is one of the oil producing states in the country, and they're all under the NNDC. NDDC, sorry, Niger Delta Development Commission. That's the
Yes.
name I was looking for previously. Now, in the Constitution, there's a requirement that says that all, states that generate mineral resources will get a 13% from the revenue or income. I'm not quite sure. It says exactly. So each state, gets a share according to the amount of um, mineral resources that they generate. For now, it seems as though we're focusing on oil as the only mineral resources because a lot of other countries, states have argued that we have this mineral, we have that mineral, and we're not enjoying the derivation, but that's a discussion for another day. Now, of the share that Ondo State gets, they've given Osopadek 40%. And what the chairman of the commission has argued is that 40% is insufficient for them to meet the needs of the plans that they have earmarked. So some of the things that he said that they've done include building schools, building roads, healthcare centers, and all of that. And he has also cited that, especially in doing many of all these projects, they need to consider the fact that they have a lot of riverine communities and expenses. For example, with building roads in riverine areas, you cannot spend the same amount of money that you spend in a dry land, for example, because there are a lot of internal factors that affect such constructions, like dredging of the roads, the fact that you have to go into swampy areas and all of that. You probably have to use twice as much of maybe cement or whatever material this is that they used to build the road. Now, so my assumption really was that when the states received that money, that they concentrated it on the specific areas where the oil is extracted from in terms of doing development projects. But reading up on this now, that does not necessarily appear to be the case. So my assumption is that money adds up to the state's budget, and then the state now decides how to allocate it. So in this case, they've decided that of the funds that they get as a state, they've allocated 40%, and the chairman is saying that what they would rightly need is 55% based on all of these challenges that they have cited. So for me, where you get your resource from, you need to take care of all those places. I was talking earlier with the other story about all the environmental issues and concerns. And these issues will most likely exist here as well. And, so when you, for example, tap oil, and you have environmental concerns with water pollution, soil pollution, and all of that, the people largely also need to look for alternative means of economic empowerment. You also need to take charge of the development of those communities. So healthcare centers, schools, hospitals, all of those sort of resources, roads, so that they can have access to markets, and all of those things are very, very important. It would be nice to know, how Ondo State allocates the actual derivation percentage that they get across the state rather, to be able to further determine whether this request has a basis, But the chairman has also cited that the amount of allocation that they received this year, is the highest they've ever received since the commission was established, which is also a plus. So my assumption is they if they do a budget, there'll be back and forth, in terms of getting the budget approved. So maybe the focus should be on their budget needs being met as against the percentage that they receive from that derivation that's allocated to the state.
I think you're quite clairvoyant because that was the next thing I was going to ask. That do you think they should be given the money, the cash, the currency, whatever, or the project that they really intended according to what they have in mind? The project, I mean, if it is roads, how about the commission or whoever, the boards in charge or whatever? They undertake that project instead. Maybe they fix the road instead for them. They have healthcare centers as opposed to just giving them money. Because we know what happens in such communities where the money is shared and
Okay, so I don't know if they actually give cash. There's no reference to that in the
so,
story.
so part of the things that they usually do with cash is bursary as well.
Oh,
So this was where this came from, or at least part of what was said. So while flagging of the 2023-2024 scholarship and bursary scheme, Poroye, that is the person in charge, reiterated the state government's to education and youth empowerment, saying that the initiative reflects the present administration. So part of it, they do the bursary and some
okay. So does
things.
that money get to them as cash? Okay, as bursaries,
Part of
partially.
them,
Okay,
yes.
true,
So
true.
part of when the allocation to them, part of what the money goes for is the people around. They get to have some support to the students.
Okay.
So it's contributed to the education. So I'm thinking, so instead of maybe giving the money, how about we're saying students from this area they're going to get scholarship,
Mhm.
or just so that the
Instead of
project,
so they pay the
yes,
money directly to institutions and then the
mm,
benefits from it rather than receiving it as cash. That
just
makes sense.
random thoughts.
Yeah, that makes sense. It appears as though they already have some sort of scholarship scheme in place. Even the chairman
No, that's
also.
personal.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's what. So I was going to reference that the chairman also has a personal. He said he's sponsoring an indigent students in the states, but it also appears that they have a scholarship uh, program as well, although there's not much information provided as to that. But I agree with you. Yeah, rather spend the money on actual things, rather than on interventions, rather than giving it directly to the people as cash.
Well, thank you. And we continue, but you can join the conversation by sending your messages on WhatsApp. WhatsApp line to use is 0911 999 0981. Again, 0911 999 0981. Mr. Ajayi Olonilowa from Abudu Jerry Sherry says, good morning. It's not a question of having a huge quantity of untapped oil reserves, but will government allow the citizens to get the full benefits when it is tapped? Oil and other mineral deposits should ordinarily belong to the people, but government control has deprived them of the benefits. If we're going to into the story, I'm sure a lot will be said because when we talk about the people, I mean, the development of oil blocks is not just solely the government's thing. And
Exactly. It
so
should
the
benefit
allocation
the
of the
people.
oil blocks itself. Let's
And one would argue, in line with what he has said, that the ones that we have even tapped already, what are we doing with it?
Joseph Maynard from Silver Estate, Ijibu, Lagos says, good morning, freshly pressed. Oh, it's Bubeni, not Chibuzo. Let's tell ourselves the bitter truth. The government at all levels are not ready for diversification from oil. All what they know where to reap, where they did not sow. There is call for people to go into farming. Those who are farmers are either killed, farmed, destroyed, or chased out. What does the government do? Absolutely nothing. Take the sad story of the fishmonger in Anambra who was killed. What has the government done? But if it's the pipeline that got blown up, they'll see the quick action. Pure hypocrisy. May God help us. All right, moving on to this one, and it's about social media. The reports Nigerian authorities have taken down nearly 59 million pieces of harmful online content and shut down more than 13.5 million social media accounts for violating the country's internet regulation. And this is according to a new compliance report. These happened, I believe, in 2024. Please go on.
Okay, so first and foremost, it's interesting. Up until when I saw this story, I didn't really have an idea that the government was front and center in doing something like this. So it's nice to see that there's a bit of proactiveness in terms of ensuring that fake news, harmful media are removed from social media. Also considering now that a lot of people tend to rely on social media as their form of information and not just the traditional news sources, for example, like radio, TV, newspaper. A lot of people would rather quote something they saw on Facebook or TikTok.
TikTok.
Exactly. TikTok. In fact, TikTok now, I don't have a TikTok account anyway, but
The White House has a TikTok account,
yeah.
which is weird considering that they're going to ban it according to them.
Well, so the way that I see it is you meet the people where they are, which is how it should be. So if the people are on TikTok, then you meet them on TikTok. But in line with all of these things, also considering now with the rise of AI, increasing rise of deep fakes, for example, where you can manipulate media to suit your agenda, whatever it is. A lot of people are finding it increasingly harder to distinguish between what is real and what is fake. Oftentimes I just get a message in a Facebook group, or sorry, in a WhatsApp group, and someone sends a link or something that says, "Is this true?" And many times when you read those stories, oftentimes you'd have been picked up by many other websites or blogs or whatever, duplicated in so many different fashions. that a lot of people will tend to hold those things as true, when in actual fact, it may just be someone's fabrication of information or someone with an agenda. So it's nice to see that the government, like I said, is being proactive about handling all of these things. They've also said that they've handled um, about almost a million user complaints, about various issues, whilst also giving people room to appeal, issues that they have raised, and they've also been able to restore posts that have been able to defend their post and all of that. So when we think about this in line with things like the cyber cyberbullying um, act, for example, cyberbullying,
Yeah,
cyberbullying
cyberbullying.
act, for example. We talk a lot about how people misuse social media, to for harmful reasons. So it's nice to see that government is being proactive about things like this. Um, what I would also like to see is a bit more awareness as to, what exactly it is that they're looking for, what they consider harmful posts and things like that, to be able to educate people. Because there are lots of people spreading misinformation ignorantly. If there's a bit more enlightenment as to what is classified as harmful posts, then that would also be good. So this takes me to the issue of the National Orientation Agency, for example, which I believe should be front and center of things like this. We talk about it a lot of times. I don't know what it is that they're doing. I can't remember if I've heard anything from them in recent times. Now more than ever is when we need that sort of agency to be able to inform people about things like this. So we want a society where, as much as possible, this the spread of harmful information is limited. We want a society where people are informed, where people can somewhat easily decode fake news from real news, or at least where people can query news when they see it. Not a situation where people just accept whatever it is they get and act on it, because sometimes people can act on information that can ultimately harm communities and the society at large.
Thank you. On WhatsApp, Oluwaseyi says, "Good morning. Oil is cursed only applies to sub-Saharan African countries because it didn't apply to Libya under the rule of Gaddafi, and it certainly doesn't apply to Middle Eastern countries like Qatar, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, etc. So we should really, really search ourselves because something is wrong with us."
Hmm.
You're chuckling. I guess you're holding back your comments. Yes. Hold your peace, I guess.
Well, he has a point. So I don't know. He has a point really. But some of these nations that he's talked about, if you realize, oil may be a major income earner, but it's not like they're so focused. So the UAE, for example, that he has highlighted, the UAE is known as a tourism hub for people. They've also managed to set up themselves as a travel hub as well, an events destination hub for people that do conferences, parties, and stuff like that. Um, we talk a lot about Dubai gold, but in reality, Dubai itself doesn't have gold. They've sort of established that reputation because they've created an avenue where people can come and buy and sell gold. So many of all of these things are areas that they've sort of diversified to be able to tap into other resources. Let's even look at Saudi Arabia, for example. Saudi Arabia, has oil and all of that. But in recent times, they're also sort of liberalizing their economy to be able to focus on, should I say, tourism, or
And
some form
sports
of
is
tourism,
something they're
sports,
using.
exactly. What's that thing they sponsor all the time? Wrestling or boxing or mixed martial arts or something. There's one competition that
Mm.
they've sort of sponsored over the years. So many of all these countries, are also realizing that we can't just think about today. We need to also think about tomorrow, because one day the oil will finish.
I hope we realize that and use the oil money to do things because the countries you mentioned, they did do something with it. And
Exactly.
diversification will always be the key thing. Moving on to Daily Post, we will reciprocate visa rules on American applicants. This is the Nigerian government to the United States.
So the United States government has, in my opinion, reminded us that there's a provision for people to disclose social media information, the social media history of their handles, across the last 5 years, I think. it's not necessarily new. I know they've said it, many years. The last time I applied for a visa was about 5 years ago. And then it wasn't part of the application process. So now I don't know if it is formally a part of the application
It's
process.
mandatory.
Yeah, so
It's
it's probably
different
stated on the
disqualified if you do
form
that.
now. So yeah, so when it comes to things like diplomacy, there's a lot of reciprocation. Do me, I do you. For example, US came and said, oh, reciprocity, we're giving Nigerians 3 months visa, you know, and there was a lot of hula baloo and all of that. So yeah, we're very much in our place to also ask for that as well. But then again, I wonder what exactly are people looking for social media history. People have said, for example, when I saw the post from on Twitter, on X rather, by the United States mission, a lot of people were replying to the post and tagging a certain individual who had made various comments, about terrorism, about hate across tribes and all of that. So that's on the one hand, that's sort of clear. We can assume that's one kind of information that they would not be welcome to receiving. But what else will they be looking for in terms of looking at our social media history? How do I even know if I apply for a visa and then they tell me, oh, they've reviewed my social media history and they found things that they don't like? Will they tell me what it is that they found that is at variance with their, should I say, their expectation or their laws? So yes, absolutely, we're in our place to also request that those who apply for Nigerian visas also declare their social media history. But what exactly is it that we're looking for, really?
I guess that's subject to them. Back to the messages. Do you want to say something?
No, no.
All right, back to the messages. Gilbert Musa from Festac says it's not about the volume of oil exploration or barrels of oil Nigeria makes. It's about the positive impact it has on the common man on the street. In the 1970s, from 1970 to 1975, Nigeria had topmost public schools and hospitals. Also, graduates were gainfully employed. Undergraduates were equally earning bursaries. Today, there is a visible departure from these societal safety nets because despite our seemingly increasing oil earnings, I'll just say something. Okay, go on.
No, no, I'll go after you.
It just hurts me each time I hear this because I remember growing up and I would hear the stories and I don't know how to feel because it feels like whatever was someone, a Gen Z, for instance, does not understand or cannot relate to whatever existed then.
Mm.
It's like you're lying. It's why sometimes you'd find some youth really angry about why then did you allow that to happen? I mean, you enjoyed all of those things. A car is already waiting for you if you were, a job is already waiting for you, you're an allowance. So what happened? And why are you now telling us these stories? Why are you making us feel like you are the most unfortunate lot on the face of the earth? That was just what came to mind as I read that.
Yeah, and I remember when I was growing up, there were private primary schools, but they weren't so emphasized because there were still public private primary schools that were good quality. Many of the people of my generation went to public secondary schools, whether they were federal or whether they were state, and they were still fairly good to a certain extent. Those of older generations, by and large, went to some form of public school, even universities, whether it was a state or a federal one. Now we have a situation where, a lot of all these public educational institutions, are not the first choice for people. Same for healthcare, for example. We've heard stories about how the royal family in Saudi, for example, would come to University College Hospital, UCH in Ibadan, to receive medical treatment. Now, even our president, our governors, our elected officials will most likely not go to a public health institution. So he's quite right as well. It's not necessarily about, the volume, the income, and all of that, but the impact on the people. And I think over the years, that's why I said earlier on that even the ones that we have drilled, that we have accessed, how have the people felt the impact? A lot of times when I look at people who beg on the roads, or I look at the state of roads or the state of society, communities, and all of that, I just really wonder, how do we explain to people that we earn so much from oil? For example, we have so much potential, so many mineral resources, Our weather, our climate is very good. We have practically everything if we sit down and think about it, even the people, but we are where we are. Sad.
I just remembered my days of doing practicals in OAU. I
Hmm.
remember, I think in year one, the Bunsen burner that we used, Ubimi, was probably from a century before. These things were rusted. The laboratory itself, it
Going
felt
back to
like
people.
being in there. 1 minute, the pipes or something could fall on you. It was that bad. And you could tell that the quality of what they used back then was really solid. But now, what was being lived on, it's just so, why? Why?
Sometimes I think we're just going through the motions as a country, because it doesn't look like there's any plan to take us to a better place, quote and unquote. You know. Like I always say, the government has its parts, even we the people also have our parts, because we the people make up the government. People don't get born into government. People get either elected or appointed into government. So they come from us, society, as a people. We all have a role to play in making this country a better place.
Okay, we'll take final messages as we wrap it up this morning on Freshly Pressed. Oluwaseyi says oil was a springboard that launched these countries into economic development. Have you seen pictures of the UAE, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia just 30 to 40 years ago? These countries now own most of the real estate in London and have diversified their country's earnings. Oil is just a small part of them right now. Why was our own different? We were doing very well before the discovery of oil, but everything went sideways after. And yes, the military had a great role to play in how we ended up where we are right now. I'm just going to hold it back. Can only take one of your message. So I'm going to take one. Ade from Lagos said, "Good morning, crew. With your first lady donating 1 billion naira to Yawata massacre victims and all the money she's dashing out, including Shay, I want to ask, does First Lady and Son office recognized in the Constitution? Which money is she donating? Is it hers or Nigerian sweat? Is this not vote buying against 2027 elections because she has been donating money?" Okay, Ade. I'll take Tony from Marine Beach, who says our problem isn't so much about generating revenue. That has never been our problem. In fact, even in finance class, you would be told that making money is the least you can do. Anybody can make money, but keeping it, multiplying it, that is the real issue. So our problem isn't so much about generating revenue, but about management of that revenue. It's said that a Nigerian leader once said back in the 70s that our problem is not money, but what to do with it. The truth is, if anyone cannot manage a little, there's not going to be a management magic when you have much, because it's expected to be faithful with a little. Our leaders have a major problem in that regard. And if there's something I could do about our curriculum, I would say let's involve financial education in our curriculum. And this is what I mean. I think people need to understand. I have such a good relationship with money because your outlook, your money mindset somehow affects your other parts of life.
Sure.
It affects how you view even people and how you relate with resources given to you because you understand this thing is sometimes finite and you have to make do with what you have. So maybe if right from the little age or right from the young age, when people are able to have that healthy mindset towards money, then people will not be seeing the government's positions as a get out of jail card financially. So maybe, just maybe, we can at least deal with these issues. But that seems like a long way now. We're done for today on Freshly Pressed. Thank you very much, Bubemi. Oh, your handle on social media again?
Okay, it's Orishega, Oritsega on X and Instagram.
Thank you. And may your accounts always be kept.
Amen.
We'll continue on Grapevine at 8:15 a.m. This is Smooth Breakfast. My name is Oluwaseun Olusegun.
But the stories,
What a country.
in-depth analysis of national current affairs. Freshly pressed on Smooth 98.1.